Good morning, everyone. My name is Doris Rodriguez, and we'll get started in just a few minutes while we give people a few moments to get us situated. So if you need to get anything, please do so now. We'll get started in a couple minutes. I also want to announce that this presentation is available with automatic closed captioning. I will now inform our Spanish speakers attendees. Hoy no proporcionaremos interpretación simultánea en español esta mañana. Me disculpo por los hispanohablantes en la audiencia. Before we begin, I want to let you know that we are broadcasting today's event live via our Facebook page, and I want to give a warm welcome to those joining us there. A few housekeeping notes before everyone who registered via Zoom will receive a copy of the presentation slide via follow-up email within the next few days. A survey will be shared at the end in the Q&A, and we will have time at the end of the presentation for questions and answers. So we encourage questions at any time. However, please remember this is a public forum, and we are being broadcasted on Facebook. My name is Doris Rodriguez, and I'm the Autism Initiative Coordinator here at Sinergia's Metropolitan Parent Center. A few words about Sinergia's Autism Initiative. The Autism Initiative project is funded by a grant from New York City's Council under its Autism Initiative. This project supplements the work of Sinergia's Metropolitan Parent Center by bringing an increased awareness to New York City residents, particularly to the communities with large Spanish-speaking populations, about the growing number of children diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Its strong outreach components targets families of children with a suspected or known diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder who are not receiving appropriate educational, health, and other related services. The initiative will link them to other services and supports that meets the individual needs of children and their families. Before we get into it, Carolina Liriano will introduce our presenters for today.
Good morning, buenos días. My name is Carolina Liriano. I will be introducing our presentation for today. We'll be discussing specialized programs in New York City Public Schools. We understand that yesterday we covered information about our autism programs. Today we will be sharing information about the rest of our programs that are also specialized. So let's get started. So this is our team. Yesterday, we had representatives of the autism program. So we had Kate Dolan Cheney and Mark Corallo talk about the NEST and Horizon, as well as the AIMS program. Today, we get to share information about the Academic, Career, and Essential Skills program, otherwise known as ACES. Our director, Andrea Clarke-Wheeler, will be sharing information. We will also talk about the IREAD program, Intensive Reading, Education, and Development Literacy Program. Rebecca Ballantine will be sharing information about IREAD. We will also go into the PATH program, which is the director is Jennifer Dole, but she is unable to be with us today, so I will be presenting on her behalf. I will then go into describing bilingual special education programs, and then I will hand it over to my colleague, Crystal Ogir, who will be talking about the sensory exploration, education, and discovery program. So as discussed previously, specialized programs are not expected to exist in every district school. Most students with disabilities, including those with autism, intellectual disabilities, and English learners with disabilities, receive support in their community schools. New York City Public Schools understands that some students may do better in schools that have special programs with expert support, and special education supports and services that do not currently exist in every district school are considered specialized program. New York City DOE specialized programs support student learning and success. Our specialized programs are designed with collaboration and inclusivity at their core to help students succeed. So here's how we do that. We have comprehensive training and ongoing support Teachers receive training before starting in the classroom, and the learning doesn't stop there. School staff, including related service providers and anyone working with students in these programs, also participate in that training. These practices spread throughout the entire school, benefiting all classrooms, not just those that have the specialized program. There is team collaboration across all of our programs. So we have teachers, related service providers, and school staff that are meeting regularly to ensure students receive that consistent support throughout the school day. And when students move to the next grade, their needs and strategies for success are carefully shared with the next teaching team. There are strong family partnerships. We maintain open communication with families to build strong relationships. This helps ensure that support continues between home and school, which is very important for our students to succeed. For new program students, we even start by visiting their homes to better understand their needs. We offer smaller class sizes. We have classes that are intentionally kept at a specific ratio, teacher to student ratio, to provide more specialized or personalized support for each student. And then we've taken lessons from our autism programs, which serve students with autism, and applied them to the PATH program, which supports students with emotional disabilities. By building on these collaborative practices and support systems, we create that foundation for every student to be able to access the general education curriculum. Now, this is a glance of our programs by schools and the grades that are served. So we have the ACES program in 50 schools serving grades K through 12. We have bilingual special education in 109 schools serving students in grades K through 12. IREAD in 8 schools in K through 4, and PATH is also a growing program currently in 7 schools serving students in grades K through 3 as well as grades 6 and 7. And now we are going to dive into the intensive reading education and development, or IREAD program, which Rebecca will share information about.
So much. Thanks for having me. So fun to come talk to you about IREAD. IREAD stands for Intensive Reading Education and Development. It is designed for students who are struggling with reading or early reading skills, the pre-literacy skills that they will need to be proficient readers as they get older. So it's designed for those students. IREAD classes are reduced size, integrated ICT classes. So that's 2 teachers, a general ed teacher and a special education teacher working together, both very responsible for the students' outcomes and happiness in their classes. And in the IREAD program, both very trained in serving students who are having some struggle or risk factors. So this program is designed specifically for students who have characteristics of dyslexia. Researchers are telling us that dyslexia is along a broad range of skill and ability. About 15 to 20% of the population has some characteristics of dyslexia. And of that 15 to 20%, about 3 to 5% will have very like stubborn, very stubborn issues, very intense issues that will need a lot of support as they get older. But all of those things are known very early. We can see signs of these struggles that will come even before students are reading. We can look for signs about their difficulty processing the sound system of English or Spanish, any language. Dyslexia is in all languages. So if they have that trouble with the sound system, we have some early cues that they could struggle when they learn to read, when they're trying to match the letters with the sounds. And we also know intervention early is really helpful. Our brains, especially until the age of 10, are really primed to learn to read. So if we can intervene early, we can support students and be preventative. So this is a preventative model, hoping to get services in early to have better outcomes for students, happier readers and children. Students, it's important to know that students with IEPs and students without IEPs are served. So that's important, and that you don't need a diagnosis of dyslexia. That sometimes comes much later, typically in 2nd to 3rd grade. One would get a diagnosis, but we can support much earlier than that. So the IREAD program is currently in 8 schools. We have students in grades K to 4 in each IREAD school, there is one class that's designated for IREAD. And so those students have that available to them. If they're in K IREAD, they can go to first grade IREAD and so on in the same school. We have 2 schools in the Bronx, 2 schools in Queens, 2 schools in Brooklyn, and 1 school each in Manhattan and Staten Island currently. Let's see if I clicked. I did. Okay. So the IREAD program is, I think it's good to think about it in the context of some big initiatives that are happening in the city. New York City Reads is happening. So we are in the middle of changing how teachers think about teaching reading and how students are learning to read in their foundational years. A big push is happening in literacy across the city. And also we have a lot of dyslexia supports for students that are being promoted by the public school system. So IREAD is really at the intersection of those 2 forces, those 2 things that are happening right now. So I think it's a really great program for that reason. A key component of the IREAD program is that the teachers in the class are trained to support students to access the curriculum, to access age-appropriate content. So that's, we do a lot of training to support that. We think about adding educational technology so that students, even if they're struggling to read the words, can have access to the ideas and the conversations and the learning that's appropriate for their age. So they also, sometimes we need to adapt the instruction, adapt the curriculum to be able to meet those needs. And we train teachers and support them in making those decisions. We also know that focusing on foundational skills is very crucial for students with autism, with dyslexia, I'm sorry. So we train our teachers and implement evidence-based programs, develop word recognition, and also think carefully about what assessments we use so we can figure out what the need for each student is. So teachers are trained in diagnostic assessments and they use those to identify students' area of need and support instruction in that area. And also we are careful about monitoring progress. So really some of these best practices from structured literacy, or if you've heard about the science of reading, all of these things are really best practices. And they're all happening in the IREAD program with an intensity through our support. Okay, and we know that a huge factor in student success, and I also would say, you know, happiness and sense of belonging in school is the expertise and knowledge of their teachers. So that's a focus of our program, is to build on their knowledge and expertise, build that base. So we do that in a couple different ways. Every school has a lead teacher who pushes into the classroom. So that teacher comes in for small group work. So we have an extra teachers available to come in to support the students' needs and also to coach the teachers. We have speech and occupational therapists that are with students depending on their needs of the IEP, but we also coordinate with those providers and the teachers, very close coordination and teaming. We train the principals in structured literacy systems to support their schools and this particular group of students. We also have had our general education and special education teachers take graduate level courses that are accredited by the International Dyslexia Association. So really beefing up their knowledge base and the skill set that they have to support our students. And we also, of course, train our teachers in evidence-based programs because we know what works. So we get the folks trained up in some programs that are evidence-based and have a strong track record of supporting students like in our program. Okay, so what kind of student who would benefit? What are the characteristics of a student who would benefit from this program? So I talked about earlier that we can see even during the pre-literacy times, even when students aren't necessarily expected to read, we can see that they might be having some difficulties with those really emerging literacy skills. And it could look like trouble retaining the letters and sounds if they're being taught, right? So if a teacher or a parent is teaching students letters and sounds and it's just not sticking, that's a sign that there could be some difficulty. They also could have trouble with what are called phonological tasks. Those are the sound, that's the sound system of our language. So not related to letters at all, but trouble with things like rhyming or pronouncing words, manipulating sounds. My own daughter has dyslexia. Sorry. She used to always say the word flowler instead of flower all the time. And I just never, it took me a long time to realize that that was dyslexia. Now looking back, it's kind of easy to see some of those things. She had a friend named Daryl. She always said Daryld. She put the D at the end of that word. So those are some signs that the child is having some struggle with manipulating the sound system. And we can think about ways to support that early, again, which is the most helpful way. They also have a lack of interest in shared reading tasks. So a child who just walks away from reading with the class or with their parent, just really not interested. Research shows kids as young as 18 months show less interest in print. The students who will grow up to have dyslexia. So very young, they're showing less attention, I think, to print is the reason for that. Older students could have scores on screeners or diagnostics that show an elevated risk, but that would be school-age children. In addition, we know that dyslexia is somewhat genetic, tends to run in families. So if there's a family history of dyslexia or difficulty with school tasks, again, the diagnosis isn't really important because the criteria has been changing over time. But what's good to think about, if possible, is if that is a trend in the family? Is that a history that the family has? Have they struggled with tasks that required reading? Does an older sibling, have they had trouble in school with reading tasks? And again, dyslexia really just affects the reading system. So the students could do really well in other aspects, but really struggle when they have to lift the words from the page. There's also a lot of co-occurrences. Students who have dyslexia can also have, they have higher rates of ADD, ADHD, trouble with writing, dysgraphia, which you can imagine is very connected to the reading, makes sense. And also speech and language issues, like we talked about. That could be something that happens too. So how to apply to IREAD? It's a really, we're trying to make it as simple as possible for you to apply if you're interested in the IREAD program. So a family could become interested, or a school-based team could support a family with the application. But all you do is email the IREAD program. So if you email us, we can send you the application. It's a form and it's pretty short. And again, students with or without IEPs can apply. Any documentation that we need to show that there's a risk or some issues to be concerned about, we can help families get that. We'll send a screener to the family, which is a questionnaire to fill out. And we'll start there. We can gather information from the school and from the teachers as we need. And so just again, currently there are IREAD classrooms in these districts: District 2, District 9, 12, 14, 15, 27, and 30, and 31. But students from any district can apply, and we can help families. We can help with the process of getting busing or things that we need to do for that nature. I think that's my wrap on IREAD. I am finished, and I'm passing my mic.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Andrea. Let's move to the slide. Sorry. My name is Andrea Clarke-Wheeler, and I serve in the role as the Director of the Academic Career and Essential Skills Program, more commonly referred to as the ACES program. So here is, I'm going to be giving you an overview of the ACES program, which supports students with intellectual and multiple disabilities. There we go. Okay. So what is ACES all about, right? So ACES programs were designed to give students supports in community school environments. So as I mentioned before, these students present with intellectual disabilities. Um, the ACES program is set to give them a strong academic foundation, and it is tailored to their specific learning needs. The programs are for students in grades K through 12 who also participate in New York State alternate assessment, which we'll get into a little later. ACES programs are offered across New York City Public Schools, grade K through 12, in districts 1 through 32. They are not available in all school districts, however, they are available in all boroughs. ACES programs provide inclusive opportunities for students, giving them access to their peers that do not have IEPs throughout the skill day, right? It's kind of the cornerstone of inclusion, right? Giving students access and opportunities in school environments. There is a focus on adaptive learning activities, the development of essential skills, or what we call skills that are needed for daily living, and a focus on work readiness through career exploration to help students prepare to be successful in their everyday, I should add, their post-secondary life, right? The life that they will live after leaving New York City Public Schools. So here is a little diagram of our 5 boroughs and where, to give you an idea of the number of programs that are available in each borough. So keeping in mind that these numbers are a blend of elementary, middle, and high schools. Here's a little bit about the student profile. So I do keep mentioning that the criteria for an ACES program are that students have an educational classification of intellectual disability or multiple disabilities, which I'll talk to you about what those two mean, they might look like for your children. In terms of their cognitive abilities and intelligence, the students do typically present with mild to moderate intellectual disability as their primary disability, if you will. Look at the assessment criteria, as I mentioned, all of the students within the ACES program must participate in New York State alternate assessment. Students that are before their CSE or community and special education, committee and special education meetings, students will typically not have a designation for NYSA. So when we think about having students that are kindergarten and grades 1 and 2 entering the program, in mind that the instructional environment is going to lend towards students that will be following a New York State alternate assessment criteria. In terms of academic and achievement, the students are expected to have abilities that are significantly below their grade level expectations. So I have a 4th grader. It is well expected that your 4th grader that will be entering into an ACES program or applying for participation in an ACES program may be able to read or write or do math at pre-K kindergarten level, right? Significantly below their grade. In terms of adaptive behavior skills is something we'll talk about when we talk about intellectual disability. So students may present with behaviors, right? That is common. However, students that present with significant behavioral concerns or aggressive or self-injurious behaviors are not typical within ACES programs. If your child does have a history of behaviors and is applying to the program, they will be offered an observation in their current learning environment to determine whether or not their behaviors can be well supported in an ACES classroom environment. So what is an intellectual disability? When we think about intellectual disability or ID, we think about it as a condition that begins in childhood and involves challenges in intellectual abilities and their abilities to carry out everyday practical life functions and deploy those skills. So a child might have difficulties with reasoning, learning at an expected rate, might have concerns with problem solving and performing their daily activities independently, right? So we think about self-care. Are they able to dress themselves, navigate toileting and hygiene? Can they feed themselves? These challenges do tend to impact not just school, but also other areas of their lives. In terms of multiple disabilities, we're thinking about the student having both an intellectual disability and another impairment that impacts their access to instruction in their learning communities. So this could be another serious disability, a physical impairment, and emotional disturbance, but very commonly in ACES programs, the student may also have autism. So the combination of intellectual disability and that other impairment will tell us that the student needs support that cannot be addressed solely in an environment that is aimed at supporting one of their impairments. So alternate assessment. So students will already be recommended for alternate assessment. I like to have this slide for families because this is a document that you should be familiar with. School teams will use the eligibility and participation criteria, which is to my right, but your left. It's what teams look for in order to determine whether or not your child will meet the criteria for New York State alternate assessment. I like to champion parents participating and being fully present and aware in the IEP process. And you should receive a document. It may or may not look like the document that is to the right of the screen, but this is a parent notification of participation, in New York State alternate assessment. It outlines the recommendation. It outlines why the recommendation was made. It talks about what your child's skills and abilities are and how the designation will affect your child on an ongoing basis in their enrollment in New York City Public Schools. It does also have a reference to information from the state on what New York State alternate assessment is. And this is a document that parents should really lean on with the recommendation, right? Applying to the ACES program should not be the first time that you hear about alternate assessment. And alternate assessment is not a recommendation that should be made in order to apply to the ACES program. So what is NYSA? Let's dig in. So New York State Alternate Assessment is a special testing program, right? It is specifically for students with significant, I will even say severe cognitive disability. It helps to measure how your students or how your children are meeting the expectations of learning standards for ELA, math, and science. Students are tested every year in math and science from grades 3 through 8. Students that are in high school will also take New York State alternate assessment before exiting New York City Public Schools. Science is something that is assessed in grades 5 and 8, and then it also is assessed again in high school. Schools use alternate assessment data in order to track progress on grade level expectations. It can also be used to determine educational priorities and write IEP goals, okay? The skills and achievement commencement credential. This is a question I get quite often. Will my child leave with a high school diploma in the ACES program? Because students within the ACES program, or I should say, when students that are alternately assessed enter high schools, they do not take credit-bearing classes. Because they are not in a credit-bearing pathway, they will not exit New York City Public Schools with a high school diploma. The Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential is the sole exit credential for students that participate in NYSA, okay? They do not take Regents exams in order to earn a high school diploma. The Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential the SAC. It recognizes the students' skills and their accomplishments that they have acquired throughout their learning in New York City Public Schools. So that 12-year learning process, K through 12, it also honors the students' preparation for life after high school. We call that their post-secondary life, right? And their continued learning opportunities. The Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential, or SAC, cannot be used to guarantee employment. So let's talk a little bit about supporting academic success, exploring careers and career readiness, and life skills. I like to call this our big three, right? These are the things that bring students and families within our program. In terms of academics, there is a focus to give our ACES students grade level instruction tailored to each student. So what does that really mean when we have a student that presents with an intellectual disability and is alternately assessed? Our teachers are providing high quality lessons that are based on what students need to learn. And they take into account not just the student's ability, but also their interests and their strengths in designing the instruction. So we're using proven teaching methodologies and approaches in order to help the students acquire those skills and achieve the highest level of success for them. The second building block is that career readiness, right? And career exploration. And we do that to help the students prepare for future careers. So we give opportunities for them to explore career skills through hands-on experience within the school and also in the local community. The ACES team supports this as they practice and evaluate potential career paths. That's that career exploration piece, helping them to gain the skills that they need for their future. The third piece is the essential skills. And this is tapping in to, where our students are struggling with their adaptive skill base, right? So giving them social and life skills through offering direct instruction and regular practice in areas of self-advocacy, problem solving, and developing independence. Through these school-based activities, students have opportunities to grow their ability to be independent, make their own decisions, and be confident in their abilities as they grow into their independence. I think I broke it. Thank you. So the ACES, a little bit about the ACES application process. Before applying to the ACES program, it's very important that your school team, or I apologize. It's very important that in that discussion with your school team, if it is a recommendation of your school team to apply to ACES, that they are giving you access to the family guide, which is available in 10 languages. Your consent to apply to the program is required. You don't need to write anything or call us, but you must be aware that the team is exploring this program for your child. And you must be in agreement that you do think that your child needs more support than the current learning environment offers. To be considered for the ACES program, there must be evaluations conducted within the last 3 years or 36 months for students that are applying to ACES programs in grades 1 through 12. If your child is applying for kindergarten ACES programs, they must have the evaluations conducted within the last 12 months because earlier on in a child's development, there is a lot of growth that happens. And we want to make sure that we're getting an accurate picture of your child's skills before we make decisions on eligibility. The IEP team or you yourself as a parent and family can submit the application directly to our inbox at acesprograms@schools.nyc.gov. When you submit the application, you'll immediately get a confirmation saying that the email was delivered into the inbox. The time for review can vary, and that depends on the grade level, the time of year that the application is submitted, as well as the amounts of information that is submitted for us to review. If the application is submitted and it is incomplete, it can add a significant amount of time for us to work with your schools or your recommending team to acquire the information to complete the application. Yep. Thank you.
Oh, it was muted. You got me. Okay. All right. Good morning. Buenos dias. Hello, everyone again. I am not Jennifer Dole. I am Carolina Liriano, Director of Bilingual Special Education Programs. But today I am presenting on behalf of my colleague, Dr. Jennifer Dole. The PATH program is for students with emotional disabilities in inclusive classrooms. And so I'll be sharing a little bit about this program with you today before I dive into bilingual special education. All right, so the PATH program was originally designed to support students who have been identified with or are at risk of being classified with an emotional disability. These are students that have experienced significant life stressors or trauma and can be supported academically in an inclusive setting. This is a program that was created in partnership between New York City Public Schools and NYU. And the goal here is to create a whole school approach that focuses on an inclusive and trauma-informed and culturally responsive practices to help every student succeed. So the PATH program is really dedicated to helping students who have emotional needs and to help them succeed in their community schools. This is a program that is really built on the care and commitment of the entire school community. And at the heart of PATH are a lot of love and teamwork and a focus on the student's strengths, right? We're focusing on not what, what the student can do and what they can do well to leverage those skills. Together, we support every child on their journey to success. So these are the 4 pillars of the PATH program that you have here, and I'm just going to be going through them. So the first one is belonging is at the center of every classroom. So every single classroom prioritizes creating that sense of belonging for all students, especially when you consider that these are students that are transferring from other schools mid-year after maybe they've been deemed eligible and accepted into the program. Co-regulation starts with me, the child, right? So educators understand that they also have to manage their own emotions and reactions to helping students regulate their emotions as well. So it's really important for our teachers and our staff members to have that skill to be able to have those self-regulation skills so that they can help students who have emotional needs regulate themselves as well. This is a strengths-based approach that we have in this program. So by focusing on the student's strength, the program opens up unlimited possibilities for success and growth. And above and beyond everything else is, the understanding that behavior is communication, right? So the program really recognizes that students' behaviors and expressions are expressions of their needs, right? And so understanding that, helping to address that and helping to understand what that behavior is communicating is going to help to address their needs effectively. All right, so this is designed to be a therapeutic environment. So the program achieves this by designing a whole school model that focuses on inclusive and trauma-informed educational practices that ensures the success of all the students. So we have a reduced ICT classroom of up to 20 students. Out of those 20 students, 4 will have IEPs or individualized education programs that require that intensive behavior, social, emotional support. And then up to 16 students will not have disabilities or will not have IEPs. These are classrooms that are taught by 1 special and 1 general education teacher. So we have 2 teachers in the classroom, 1 special educator, 1 general educator, and they are teaching through a trauma-informed lens. And they've completed pre-service training, and they participate in ongoing training and consultation. This is the very nature of all of our specialized programs, and the fact that our teachers and our staff that are supporting these classrooms are receiving this training and development support so that they can improve on their practices to serve the population that they're serving. There are occupational therapists and social workers providing push-in therapeutic intervention strategies in the classroom. And then I also want to mention that all PATH staff are trained in therapeutic crisis intervention for schools, which is TCIS. And this is a co-regulation intervention. Finally, students may be screened and determined eligible with parental consent to participate in this therapeutic intervention. Bounce back or cognitive behavior intervention for trauma in schools, or CBITS. These are school-based interventions for students who have experienced stressful events that teach coping skills, and we're drawing from the students and the family's strengths in order to better support them. Now let's dive into some of the what is the profile of the student that is eligible or can be supported in this program, and what are the eligibility criteria? So the PATH program, again, is designed for students who either have an emotional disability, which is one of our 13 disability classifications, or may be at risk of developing one. This is a program for students who have average to below average intellectual abilities, and they show consistent development in areas like speaking, understanding language, memory, and focus. It's really important to note here that students with emotional and behavioral challenges may not do as well on tests. And so their test scores might not truly reflect their abilities, especially if they're not receiving the right support. So this is what we're looking to address as well in this type of program, recognizing that they might have these challenges. In terms of academic progress, students in the PATH program typically perform at or near grade level. They do take the same state assessments like the New York State Math and English Language Arts exam, or ELA, and they can work both on their own and in small groups with some help. Continuing to expand on the student profile and eligibility criteria for a PATH student, students may have mild to moderate difficulty with emotions and behavior that can include struggle with self-control. They can be easily frustrated or present as impulsive. They may present with rapid mood changes or difficulty handling stress. These are students that may have difficulty focusing on schoolwork or participating in social situations outside of the classroom. They may also find it challenging to trust others or to make friends. So their relationships with other students and other adults might be impacted. And they may also present with physical symptoms like stomach aches or headaches. Behaviors are assessed based on the child's age, culture, and unique needs. It's important to note here that students in this program may need support with developing their social skills, such as forming and maintaining relationships, coping with withdrawal or lashing out in social situations, following social rules and norms, as well as coping with anxiety that affects social interactions with peers and adults. Now, this is a program that is fairly new and still expanding, but this is information on how you can apply to the program if you believe your child might be a good fit. So to obtain information on the PATH program, we encourage you to please reach out to our email, pathprograms@schools.nyc.gov. You can also work with your child's school's IEP team to apply, or you can submit the application on your child's behalf. Placements are offered similar to all specialized programs. Placements are offered based on distance from the student's home to the school, and offers are always made to the closest available program. This applies to all of our specialized programs. Currently, there are PATH classrooms in grades K through 2nd, and these schools are located in Districts 4, which is in Manhattan, District 9, which is in the Bronx, and District 17, which is Brooklyn, and District 27 in Queens. There's also one middle school in District 9 that is in the Bronx. So students in any district may apply to this program. Again, this is an expanding program that, is just starting out. So we hope to eventually be able to serve it through 12th grade and obviously in more school districts. But just because you don't see your home districts here doesn't mean that you may not be able to apply to it. You certainly can submit an application, and we will offer, if your child is eligible after review, we would offer the closest available placement for that child. Okay. So that is information about our PATH program, and now I get to talk about the program that I oversee with my team. The overview, I'll be providing an overview of bilingual special education, which is a program for English language learners with disabilities. So these are students that we identify or call them students who are duly identified. These are students who have a disability but are also in the process of learning a new language, in this case, English. And so how do we better support these students, taking into account their language needs as well as their disability needs? So really excited to share information about the different types of programs that we have available under the umbrella of bilingual special education. This is our agenda for the next few minutes. So I'll be covering information on what is bilingual special education, where are our programs located in districts 1 through 32, what are some important things for you to know as a family about the bilingual assessment process? It's really important that you are involved in understanding of the different factors that we should be looking at when we're considering this type of recommendation. And then how do we go about making sure that we have a better understanding of what language of instruction looks like for that student that needs that bilingual support. Then I'll talk briefly about the kindergarten IEP process, which I know is about to start, right? If you have a little one that's about to go into kindergarten next year, I'll be talking a little bit about what that process looks like so that you're prepared for that IEP meeting. And then for students who are currently in grades K through 12, we'll be talking about the inquiry process for placement in this type of program. So how do you go about asking for placement in this specialized program? All right, so bilingual special education supports students who, again, have disabilities and also have English language learning needs. These are the students that we refer to in New York City Public Schools, New York State as a whole, United States federally. These are English language learners. So in order to offer this very specialized program, we have to follow very important rules and regulations, right? But there are two that really help us in the design and the provision of this program and this service. So we have special education law, which is referred to as Commissioner's Regulations Part 200. These are laws that focus on the delivery of special education services, on how we identify and how we support these students appropriately, right? So we're helping schools through this regulation create those individualized education programs, those IEPs that are going to outline each and every support that your child will benefit from based on their disability and what the outcome of the evaluation process was. For bilingual special education students, this is going to ensure that we're offering them not just the programs and services that they need based on their disability, but also the needs and services that they need based on their language acquisition and how far along during their English language learning journey they are. Now, the other law or rules that govern, the ability to offer this program are rules and laws that apply to English language learners. And so these focus on students learning English as a new language. So schools are using this law, these regulations, to assess how well students are speaking both English and their home language. So they also make sure that students are learning, continuing to develop their home language, and we do this by offering bilingual education. Important to note here is that bilingual education doesn't exist only for students who have special education. It also exists for students who do not have disabilities and are in general education classrooms. So our goal as we're combining these laws and these regulations is really to make sure that, again, these students that are duly identified, students that are learning English and have also been identified to have a disability, get the right support. And this approach is going to help us make sure that they succeed in school and grow in both English and their home language, giving them that opportunity to really thrive. This is a diagram that's supposed to show you all the services, all the programs that we offer to English language learners in New York City Public Schools, including those with disabilities, right? So these are students who are learning English, and you can find them anywhere and everywhere in our school system. These are students that are taught in very different ways depending on what they need to succeed. They could be in a general education classroom receiving speech and language therapy only, or they could be in a special class. They could be served in District 75. It is important for me to mention here that most English learners with disabilities are served in classrooms where the main language of instruction is English. In these classrooms or programs, they get the help that they need from the teacher, and they might get what's called English as a new language, which is a service that's delivered to students when they're learning English. And then their English language acquisition skills are tested yearly to ensure that they're making progress in English. So again, this is just to depict, all the different services that are available for our students. Obviously, not just bilingual special education may not be appropriate for every child. And as I mentioned, most students who are learning English are served in classes where the teachers may teach in the main language to teach is in English. But there are going to be those students that are going to need that extra support in their language in order to be able to understand what's going on in the classroom. This is an overview of where our schools are and where we have our programs. So you'll see that every borough is labeled along with a number. That number shows the number of schools that offer a type of bilingual special education program. So for example, in the Bronx, not schools, classes. So for example, in the Bronx, we have 75 classes. In Manhattan, we have 115. In Queens, we have 93. In Brooklyn, we have 68. In Staten Island, we have 22. These numbers are growing every year. We're expanding our programs based on student need, based on where we see these recommendations are being made. We also monitor demographic shifts in our communities. So as we notice that students or families of a specific language background are moving to a specific area, we might focus on creating programs in those areas to meet those needs. These classes are currently spread out through 109 schools, and the language of service for these students are Spanish, Mandarin, and American Sign Language. Now, I am going to spend some time on this slide because it does present to you an overview of what our programs are and what the umbrella of bilingual special education looks like, right? So when we're talking about bilingual special education, we're talking about special education models, which are to your left, and bilingual language models, which are to your right. So when we talk about the type of special education program, we are talking about an integrated co-teaching program or a special class. The staffing looks different in these programs, as well as the makeup of the students, the student makeup. So in integrated co-teaching classes or ICT classes, we are serving students with and without IEPs. In grades, in kindergarten, we have 10 students with an IEP. In grades 1 through 12, we'll have 12 students with an IEP. And the rest of the students are students without disabilities. We're not supposed to know who has an IEP, who doesn't have an IEP. This is a classroom that's considered general education for all intents and purposes. We have 2 classroom teachers. One teacher is a special education teacher, and one teacher is a general education teacher. Now, what makes a bilingual ICT is the requirement that we have as, a special education office, New York City Public Schools, is that these teachers must be bilingual and biliterate in the home language of the child. So the special education teacher will be a bilingual special education teacher. The general education teacher will be a bilingual general education teacher, and both will be working together to support this group of students. So that covers the ICT program. Now let's move down to the special classes. We know that special classes offer more specialized support for students who have individualized education programs or IEPs. All the students in special classes will have a disability, will have an IEP. The ratios will vary based on the program. So you could have a special class that could have 12 students. You could have a special class that could have 15 students. You could have in District 75 classes that have 8 students, 6 students. The ratio will vary depending on where the special class is located. Some special classes may also have a paraprofessional, which is a second adult in the classroom who, again, speaks the student's home language, right? So now the expectation for the special class, in order for it to be bilingual special class, is that that teacher has to be bilingual and biliterate. And I say bilingual and biliterate because we want to make sure that we understand that the teacher is not just only able to speak and have a conversation in the language, but is also teaching your children how to read and write, depending on the type of program that they're in, depending on the type of bilingual program that they're in. So we've covered the special education models, ICT or special class. Now let's shift gears a little bit and move to the right and focus on the bilingual language models. Really important here to note that there are two types of bilingual education programs, and those are dual language bilingual education and transitional bilingual education. The goals of these programs are very different. The student makeup of the program is also different, and I'll be going through what each of these entail. So dual language bilingual education programs serve both English learners and English proficient students. So these are students who, English proficient students that may want to learn a new language. And then we have the English learners that need the program because they're developing those English language skills. Students are learning 2 languages with balanced instruction time for each subject. So that means that typically all the subjects are taught in English and, let's say, Spanish. So you will have English language arts in English, and then you will have home language arts, which is, let's say, in Spanish, right? So we're developing those literacy skills in both languages. The goal here is for students to be able to read, write, and speak in both languages. So for a bilingual special education student, they may, need this service initially because their disability is really affecting how they're learning a language. But after, a few years, when they've reached English proficiency, they could still remain in the program because, again, the goal here is to ensure that they become bilingual and biliterate adults. These are students who may graduate from high school and may be able to attain what's called the seal of biliteracy, which states that they have graduated as, from a bilingual program and are able to speak, read, and write in both their home language and English, which really is an amazing accomplishment. Now, these are our dual language programs. Now, our transitional bilingual education programs serve only students that are English learners, right? So in this case, if we're talking about a special class that follows the transitional bilingual education model, we're talking about 12 students with IEPs, with disabilities, who are also English language learners and need that support in order to continue their progress in learning English. And when I say that support, I mean bilingual instruction to help them be able to be successful in the classroom. In the TBE programs or transitional bilingual education programs, students take classes in both English and their home language. But it's really important to note here that as the students' English language skills improve, the instruction in English increases. And so what we see is that once a student has reached English proficiency, they can exit the program into a monolingual program. So you'll notice that the goal of both programs is very different, but we're still offering that instruction in the student's home language. And a student with a bilingual special education recommendation is considered served, is considered supported in either program. All right, so let's talk about the profile for a student that has a bilingual special education recommendation. So these are English language learners with disabilities who are in need of this bilingual special education program because they have special learning needs as a result of their disability, which is impacting how they're acquiring a new language. Typically, for a student without a disability, we might say it will take 5 to 7 years for them to develop English language proficiency academically, right? So we can assume that for a student with a disability, that's going to take a little bit longer. And so thinking about how the disability is affecting the way that they're learning language, this is who this program is intended for. This is where we're going to lean in on those teachers that are bilingual to be able to provide that language instruction that the student needs in their home language in order for them to be able to understand what's going on in the classroom. So teachers are trained to work with students who are English learners with disabilities and understand their very unique learning needs. Lessons are taught in the home language for some or all subjects. So we're thinking back to the dual language program, they'll typically receive instruction in both languages for all subjects. And transitional bilingual education programs, it might just be 1 or 2 bilingual areas, and then the rest of the instruction is in English, and the students might receive more support in their home language if they're at the very early stages of learning English. But if they've already, been here for, let's say, 5, 6 years, the support that they need in their home language might not be as much. And so that support is decreased as they're learning English. So again, the program is truly designed for students who are just starting to learn English or are in the process of learning English still and need that additional support, that additional instructional time in their home language in order to understand what's going on in the classroom. All right, so these are some of the instructional practices that you might see in our classrooms. Bilingual special education classrooms, they're not just about translating here and there. They're really designed to make sure that we're providing that intentional support throughout the school day. Teachers and paraprofessionals are speaking the student's home language, and they provide that support depending on the student's needs. Teachers and paraprofessionals are working together throughout the day. They're planning before your child gets to the classroom in order to meet the needs of each student. And they're focusing not just on the disability, they're also focusing on the language needs of that student. Students in these programs are learning subjects like math, science, and social studies in their home language. And they also have lessons in reading, writing, and other language skills in their home language to help them grow in both. And classrooms are welcoming and they're inclusive of bilingual materials, visuals to help students who are learning English. Items in the classrooms are usually labeled to make it easier for students to really understand their environment, but also the academic content that's being presented to them. Now, the IEP team, which includes you, the family, the parent, the guardian, decides if bilingual special education is right for your child. This decision is made based on individualized evaluations, and your feedback is really important during these meetings, right? We want to understand how your child is communicating at home, how your child is communicating in school, in their community. Using that information is going to be really helpful to support them and understand whether or not they're going to need a bilingual teacher. So the team recommends the right type of special education program, like the ICT class or the special class that we talked about. They might also consider related services that are bilingual. So a child may receive speech and language therapy by a bilingual provider. And they're going to use that information from a bilingual evaluation and consider the student's language needs and then make a determination based on those evaluations and the input that you're bringing to the team. I can't stress enough how important it is, your input in that decision, because especially when we're talking about a specialized program like bilingual special education, we're talking about a program that does not exist in every school. And so we're going to need your input, your willingness and consideration when you're thinking about moving your child from one school that doesn't have a program to a school that does offer the program if one is offered. A really important thing to note here, similar to all of our specialized programs, is that transportation is available for these students. So if you happen to, have a child that is recommended bilingual special education and they're offered a placement outside of your zone or outside of your district, something that's really not accessible for you, we can coordinate with the Office of Pupil Transportation so that the student can receive transportation. It might not be door to door, but we do, in most cases, are able to offer, closest curb to school, and in some cases, door to door, depending on the distance. All right, so what are the steps? What are the considerations in the bilingual assessment process? So let's talk about the key factors in this bilingual evaluation process and how they help decide whether or not bilingual special education is right for your child. So when the IEP program, along with you, is thinking about bilingual special education, we're going to look at the student's education, the student's language needs to figure out the best language of instruction on the IEP. And some important things for you to consider are listed here, right? So we're going to look at a bilingual evaluation that's going to tell us about how that disability that your child has been identified with is going to impact their ability to learn a new language. How quickly do we expect the child to be able to attain the skills that they need to attain in order to become proficient in English? What do the student's academic skills look like in both English and the home language? What's the student's educational history? Has the student just arrived from Colombia or Mexico? Were they in a bilingual program in in their home country? These are some of the things that we're going to look at. For a student that is in the process of being evaluated for kindergarten, for those kindergarten IEP process, or formerly known as Turning 5 process, is the student in a bilingual preschool program? How does that language in that classroom look like? How does that language support or instruction look like in that classroom? What are the assessment results? What are the tests, the exams that are being administered to the child? What do those look like in the student's home language and English? So these are just some of the factors that the IEP team will be reviewing. And it's really important that you as a family are aware of what those factors are, because you're bringing a lot of information to this meeting as well.
And your feedback is just as important as all, as a teacher's observation, as a bilingual evaluation. So we value your feedback and obviously your understanding of, what bilingual programs are, educating you through that process so that you understand why we're making this decision for your child. All right, so how do we go about seeking support in identifying placement? So the IEP team is going to discuss this recommendation with you, the family. They will talk with you about whether or not this program is available at your current school. And then they're going to review a list of programs, bilingual programs citywide. This is a parent-facing list, so when you receive this document, you're going to be able to click on this link, and it's going to take you to a page that you're able to see where bilingual programs are located, whether they're bilingual general education or bilingual special education. So if I have a child that was evaluated and was recommended bilingual ICT with a language of service of Spanish, I can go in and I can select a district where I live or the borough where I live. I can select ICT, I can select the language of service, and I will be able to see the potential schools where my child might get an offer to. Keep in mind though, that we are only able, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, but these placements are offered by, centrally by our team. And so this is just to give you an idea of where you might get placement offered to, but we're going to confirm placement in this program once the school's IEP team reaches out to us and formally submits the inquiry for placement. I want to move on to the next slide, but want to make sure that I stress again how important it is that you feel comfortable asking questions about the recommended service and why bilingual instruction is the best choice for your child. Because again, we're talking about a service that's not offered in every New York City public school. And more likely than not, you may need to transfer to another school in order for your child to receive this service. And so we want you to have an understanding, a full understanding of why this is being offered and what the importance of bilingual education is. I think that there's still a lot of misinformation about bilingual education, and that, it might slow down progress, or that it might, slow down learning English. That is not true. This is information that has been proven to not be true by research. Bilingual education is, amazing in terms of using that student's language skills that they have in their home language and using that to connect it to English. I can't speak highly enough about bilingual programs. My own daughter is in a bilingual general education program, so I strongly encourage you to look into those. All right, so steps for bilingual special education placement and support. So we can only confirm placement in a BSE program if once the IEP team completes the IEP and submits an inquiry to our team. They'll email us at bseprograms@schools.nyc for more information. You also have this email and have the ability to follow up with us on an application. While you're waiting for your child to receive placement in our program, they're going to be placed in a monolingual class with a bilingual paraprofessional, what we call an alternate placement paraprofessional. So for example, let's say that we recommended special class in Spanish or special class in Mandarin. Your child would be placed in a special class within that school building that is monolingual, but they're going to be paired with a bilingual paraprofessional that speaks the home language of the child, while our team works to find placement in a school that has the program. Now, if a District 75 BSE program is recommended, then the team has to follow another process where they reach out to that appropriate team in order to find a District 75 school that offers this type of support. When you receive an offer to a bilingual special education program, you have the right to visit the school before you accept. And if you choose not to accept the offer, the IEP team is then going to discuss other options with you that might be available in the school building to support your child. Once a student is recommended for bilingual special education, the IEP team should keep reviewing this annually to make sure that the student continues to need that support, right? As I mentioned before, it takes about 5 to 7 years typically for a student to learn a new language. That might take a little bit longer with a student that has a disability, but eventually they're going to learn it, they're going to get it, and that doesn't mean that they might continue to need a language of service other than English on their IEP. And so this is when we look at looking at teachers of observations, assessments, tests, your feedback to the teachers on whether or not the student really continues to need this type of support. So this is something that's really important for us to keep in mind, that this is not a recommendation that's intended to be around for, you know, the child's entire trajectory through 12th grade. It's something that, you know, eventually is going to, might change to English after they no longer need that support. Really quickly, before I hand it over to my colleague who will be sharing information about the SEED program, this is the process that you follow for your kindergartners, your babies that are about to enter kindergarten in September, right? So students who may get this recommendation through the kindergarten IEP process in the spring, the IEP teams won't be reaching out to us. You don't need to reach out to us. We know through our work with the Office of Student Enrollment and the Office of Special Education who is getting these recommendations. And so we will work together across our offices to make sure that every kindergartner has an a placement offer for a BSE program by June. But we continue to work on placements throughout the summer. So this is a process that, you know, continues through the very first day of school, making sure that every child that receives this recommendation has a program that is offered to them. Once a BSE placement is identified, you as the parent or guardian are going to receive a formal letter in the mail, followed by a call from our team, where we're going to be able to provide information about the program, share information about transportation, and answer any concerns that you might have. For our middle and high school students, we work closely with the Office of Student Enrollment through the middle and high school admissions process to make sure that students who are currently in the program are able to transition to a school that also offers this type of program at the middle and high school level. So again, that may not necessarily be something that you are involved in, aside from making sure that you are listing schools that have this program, the correct program, on the student's middle and high school application. So again, really important here to refer back to that list of bilingual special education programs and bilingual general education programs to look at schools within your community that offer, whether it's a bilingual ICT class or a bilingual special class, so that you can rank them on your application, and that way we can offer placement that way. If you're not able to do that, then we are going to offer placement through waitlist during the spring, and that process is actually going to start pretty soon. All right, so I am now going to hand it over to my colleague Crystal, who will be sharing information about the SEED program. You're already hooked up with the mic. I'm going to give you the clicker.
Thank you so much. My name is Crystal Ogir. I'm the Related Services Specialist for New York City Public Schools, and I'm delighted today to speak to you about the SEED program. SEED stands for Sensory Exploration, Education, and Discovery. It's a specialized program for students who have strong sensory needs that make it hard for them to focus and participate in school. The program is designed to help these students by giving them support they need to explore and learn in a way that works for them. So what is SEED? As I just said, it is a program designed for students with these intense sensory needs that affect their ability to participate in school. And it is a program supervised by licensed occupational and physical therapists. In the program, students use specialized equipment such as swings, trampolines, therapy walls, and climbing walls, all in a specially designed space. And the goal is to help students prepare their bodies and minds for learning through calming and energizing activity, depending on what the students need based on their sensory profile. It includes a sensory-based curriculum to improve self-regulation, which is managing thoughts, emotions, actions, and attention. There is a family engagement portion of the program at the end of each session, which is to strengthen that homeschool connection and support caregivers as partners. And here are some pictures of students engaging in our SEED program. And so the structured sensory enrichment program where students move to grow. It is a movement-based program. So throughout the program, students are moving and engaging in various sensory activities throughout the whole session. So an overview of the SEED program started in the 2021 to 2022 school year. And we wanted to support our students returning to school after the pandemic. We knew a lot of our students experienced a tremendous amount of learning loss. Many of them were isolated from their peers, and they had a lot of difficulty acclimating back to school, social settings, and we really wanted to provide as much support as possible. Supporting that transition, and also giving families the opportunity to engage their children in a sensory experience free of charge that many times that was not possible for many of our families. So it was developed to help students participate in the sensory movement program, and it focused on enrichment and engagement. So why sensory play? We know that children learn best and remember best when we actively use their senses. Sensory play helps build important brain connections, supporting brain development. So the program uses specialized sensory equipment and a curriculum created by experts. SEED helps students with intense sensory needs, and this program improves academic skills, social emotional learning, and behavior. So a little bit more about our program overview. When it runs, it occurs after school on select weekdays and on Saturdays. We have SEED programs at 80 schools across the city. We have a SEED program in every school geographic district, at least 2 in every school district. So if you are interested in the program, there is one in your school district, at least one. Each session lasts 45 minutes. Again, it is led by occupational and physical therapists. We have at most 4 students per session. This is hard work for our kids that experience sensory needs, have difficulty with transitions, have difficulty filtering out loud sounds, being in crowded rooms. If you're a parent with a child who experiences sensory difficulties, you know firsthand how difficult it is for them. So doing this type of work that challenges their sensory system is very hard. So we don't have groups any larger than 4 students. And it is in a specialized space. Activities that take place are designed in a space with sensory equipment to support the students. And it's important to note that all of our AD sites are outfitted with the same sensory equipment. So no matter where you live across the city, if you're attending one of our SEED sites, your child has access to the same type of equipment. They're going to engage in the same curriculum. And we did this intentionally so that way all children has the same access and it's equitable across the city. And family involvement and engagement is an important component of the program, and it helps connect what students learn at school and with support at home. We give an opportunity for all of our parents to come into each session where the providers can help train the parents hands-on techniques to help calm their students. Sometimes we hear our parents tell us that their child has a difficulty sitting and attending or completing an activity. So if we see we're able to have their child engage in those types of activities in SEED, we'll invite the family in during that part of the session and have them observe what we're doing so that way they can help replicate that at home. So the SEED student eligibility criteria, they need to be enrolled in a New York City public school preschool program through 12th grade. We do take 3K students, so the program is designed from 3K through 12th grade. We have 3 different levels of our curriculum, so I know it seems like a very wide range of but we did adapt our curriculum so that way, depending on the age, academic level, cognitive level of your child, we then select the curriculum that best suits your child, and the therapists do adapt it as needed. Your child has to have a current IEP with occupational therapy mandate. Most of our children that do have these intensive sensory needs, they already are receiving occupational therapy because that is really the related service that addresses the sensory needs. And again, they have to display intensive sensory needs that significantly impact school function and participation. And the goals of the SEED program is to help students become aware of their sensory profile, and we teach the students and family sensory strategies that support both academic and social participation. And then we share successful integration strategies with the student's school for integration into the school's natural learning environment, right? Because not every strategy works for every student. So within our sessions, we try a variety of different strategies with the student, and it's really important that each student understands their own profile and what works for them, and that they're also able to advocate and express, whether it's verbally or through pictures, or if they use an AAC device. We have all of those scenarios happening in our SEED program. We have children who come in walking, children who come in utilizing their wheelchair. But it is very important for us who run SEED that our children are able to express to their teachers, to their caregivers, what they need when they are having these sensory difficulties, because we want to be able to meet the needs before they're having a meltdown, before the needs become too great, and then the behaviors start. Because once their sensory systems start to be, too overwhelmed, it's really hard to calm those systems down. So we really want to be able to, meet our kids' needs before their systems become overwhelmed. And here are some pictures of our sample SEED spaces. Something I want to mention that the SEED program is an enrichment program. It is in addition. If you meet the criteria and you want to enroll your children. It is in addition to their mandated sessions. This is not in place of. We're so happy for the 4th year now to be able to offer this program. It is a nice option to be able to have a place to bring your child after school or on the weekends. There are not many programs designed specifically for children who have these needs on the weekend to have, something to do. A lot of our children, report that they make friends at the CE program. They always say they love coming to their sensory school or their sensory program. And it really was designed with them in mind, where they could be themselves and really, express what they need and get their needs met. So every session, again, no matter where you're attending throughout the city, we all follow the same session flow, and we all have these same symbols posted in all our rooms. Because sometimes, especially when our kids are feeling very overwhelmed, we don't want to further overwhelm them with either a lot of language, whether it's print or verbal, and sometimes symbols work just well and visuals for them. So we start up with a warm-up, then we move into gross motor activities, visual, vestibular, visual motor activities, if they're able to engage in that, as that can be a very strong sensory input. Then we spend some time doing fine motor and a social emotional activity. And then we always end with deep relax. The end of the session, typically this is where we invite our families in, and we do a lot of family training on deep relaxation and how to help calm and organize our students. So what is sensory integration? Sensory integration is how our brains understand and organize the information that we get in our environment, such as sight, sound, touch, and it helps us do our everyday activities. So if you have a sensory system that's working well with itself, we're able to engage in our environment and it doesn't bother our daily activities at all. You're able to get out the subway, maybe you walked over here, you're able to find the building, no problem. But if you have a sensory system where everything's not working so well, maybe everyone on the subway was bothering you the whole time, all the loud noises really bothered you, you might have missed your stop, or maybe just being in that environment was too much, like many of our kids, and you might have to have some vocalizations, you might need to start pushing people away. So there are a lot of different activities we can engage our students with to try to calm down those systems and get them to work with each other and, slowly start building their ability to tolerate more noises, more people around. But like I mentioned before, this is hard work for them and it takes some time. And why does it matter? When sensory systems are well regulated, it helps children develop important skills in areas such as social emotional well-being, physical and motor skills, communication, self-care, cognitive skills, and adapting to daily routines. One of the nice kind of consequences of kids coming to the CE program that we've heard from many families is that the children are expressing more, they're talking more, they're getting dressed more independently. And then also when you have challenges with your sensory integration, there are difficulties with how the brain processes information. So doing everyday activities get harder, such as doing schoolwork, playing with friends, completing daily activities, and following social rules, right? Because it's hard for our friends to understand sometimes that those loud noises, and if you're standing too close to me, I I didn't mean to push you, but that was bothering me so much. I couldn't find the words to say, you're standing too close to me, and I had to just push you away. So the long-term impact is that without help, these sensory integration challenges can, and they do, continue into adults. It's really important to note that these issues, they don't just resolve on their own. And it does affect work, it affects relationships, and it affects everyday functioning. So in the SEED curriculum, we work with sense integration, a program called Zones of Regulation, and also social emotional learning, because our senses are tied into our emotions. So structured sensory supports, what are those? There are tools or activities or techniques that can help adjust the amount of sensory input a student experiences. These supports can help them focus and learn better. So why they help? Are some students need sensory support to help them feel just right. Not too sleepy, not too over alert. This balance helps them focus, make decisions, and interact more effectively with others. And it's also important to note that many times, students don't always seek out the activities they need when they're in an overexcited state. Okay, they really need the help of a trained professional to help get them to that just right state. If you have a child that needs to be alerted, they won't always seek out the activity that gets them there. Or if you have a child that's already overexcited, they won't always seek out the activity to calm them down. And here are just some pictures here of our kids engaging in some activities that we've done in SEED. So here is a picture of a program that all of our sites use called the Zones of Regulation. And here's a picture of our zones check-in. It says, I feel, and I'm in the blank zone. So it's 4 different colors, and each color is associated with a different emotion. Again, it's very important for us to teach our children to communicate how they're feeling. And also, if they're not able to attach it just yet to emotion, maybe they'll be able to tell us by a color, right? Because once they could tell us how they're feeling, we then attach that to having them tell us what they need, right? If they're feeling maybe worried or angry or sad, then the next step is, what do they need so that they could maybe feel happy or calm? So we do this at the beginning of every session and at the end of every session. And as students get more familiar and comfortable with this zones check-in, we then give a check-in and a choice board for families with common activities that they would have at home so they could do carryover using a check-in and expressing what they need in the home. So social emotional learning, it's the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to understand and manage emotions, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain relationships, make responsible and caring decisions, and set and achieve personal and collective goals. So SEED follows a progressive social emotional learning curriculum. And it's broken down, you'll see here, into 5 units based on the different sessions. And you'll notice our first 2 units are heavily focused on self-awareness and self-management. Because it's very important for us, for our students to be aware of what their sensory profile is, and what they need, so they could communicate that to their teachers, to their caregivers. And then we move on, because not all of our kids are quite able to grasp all these concepts. It's a little more abstract, but the social awareness and the relationship skills, the responsible decision making, because our sensory needs can affect, our relationships, our friendships, and that takes communication, right? To explain to our friends how we're feeling, what we need. So we do get into that a little further in our sessions and in our units, because not all of our sensory concerns always resolve over the course of the lifespan, right? As we all know, friends or adults that first thing in the morning, they may need to work out, right? They need to go for their morning run, or they don't feel quite right. We have our nervous eaters, people who need to chew gum all the time. These are all different kind of sensory needs and different things that people do to help calm themselves. And it's important for our students to learn how to communicate these needs, right, from a young age to their friends, because if not every sensory need resolves as they get older, it would be important for them to continue to communicate those needs, so it doesn't continue to affect friendships and relationships as they get older. So the sensory toolbox, we're constantly talking to our students about your sensory toolbox. And it's not a real toolbox, it's different strategies that we tell them that you put this in your sensory toolbox. The SEED program is designed to support students to learn about their unique sensory needs. Students are encouraged to build their sensory toolbox by identifying sensory tools that help them get ready to learn by building a foundation for lifelong learning. So here we have, and again, we have pictures that are pre-cut out for the kids that need it. For the kids that can cut out, they'll cut out their own pictures. Kids that can write, they write down what they need. And it says tools to wake up and tools to slow down. So they recognize what their own body needs when they need to wake up and when they need to slow down. Because depending on the situation, you might need to wake yourself up, or if you're in class and you just sit for a while, you might need to slow down. So this is just some context for all of our special programs. However, if you are interested in the SEED program and your child does have a mandate for occupational therapy, please reach out to your school's occupational or physical therapist. If you don't have one on site, you could reach out to your school's AP or your principal. We have shared the information for enrollment with all of our schools. SEED does run on cycles throughout the school year. We are currently in our first cycle, so we are not enrolling more students right now for our first cycle because children won't get the full experience. We want them to be able to start from the beginning of the cycle, but we do encourage families to complete the enrollment survey, so that way we will contact them to enroll for the spring. Thank you so much.
Alrighty, thank you so much. As we mentioned earlier, we will now be opening the floor for Q&A with our presenters. Please make sure to write all your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. So we're going to start with our questions from the Q&A and the Facebook. Are PAV, SEED, and IREAD programs offered in all 5 boroughs? To answer that question, IREAD is offered in districts 2, 9, 12, 14, 15, 27, 30, and 31. Students in any district may apply. PAV programs are currently offered in districts 4, 9, 17, and 27. Students in any district may apply. Second questions, are PAV and SEED and IREAD programs offered from kindergartens through high school? PAF is a growing program currently serving grades K through 2nd and 6th grade. IREAD is in 8th grade, is in 8 schools in grades K through 4th. And for more information about these programs, we encourage you to reach out to each program via email.
Yep. Yeah, SEED is offered 3K through high school, and it is offered in all boroughs and in all districts.
Thank you. Next question. What is the process of getting to specialized programs? What initial evaluations are required for all programs presented today? To answer that question, for each program, it looks a bit different. For ACES, students need to have thorough evaluations completed within the past 3 years. For kindergarten applicants, applications must be conducted within the last 12 months. Bilingual special education is an IEP recommended program and typically will result from bilingual evaluations conducted by a school or pathologist. Correct? Question 4. Is it safe to assume that the PATH program can serve students with mental health needs or just to regulate and emotional support? To answer that question, the PATH program is designed to support students who have been identified with or are at risk of being classified with an emotional disability. This may suggest mental health needs. In addition, an important criteria is that students may have experienced significant life stressors or trauma. Next question. Can you elaborate on the physical discomfort a student who meets the criteria for the PATH program may experience, and why does this happen? You mentioned the stomach and headaches. To answer that question, kids with emotional challenges may feel stress or worry very intensively, and that can sometimes cause a physical discomfort. For example, they might get headaches or stomach aches. This happens because our bodies and emotions are closely connected, especially when a child is overwhelmed. Moving on to one of our questions via Facebook. Does the CSE team conduct the evaluations for children entering kindergarten?
So the CSC can conduct those evaluations, but also the IEP team at the school can conduct the evaluation. So it really all depends on how the case is assigned. So depending on who gets your child's case, it could be a committee on special education, it could be a school-based IEP team.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. I believe this is for you, Carolina. Can you find bilingual education in autism programs like AIMS, NEST, and Horizon?
We do have a school that offers bilingual autism programs, but it is not, it's not found outside of the school. So, but if a student is recommended for an ACES program or an autism program and their language of service is other than English, is their home language, what will happen is if they're found eligible for the program, they can go into the program, but they'll get that support from that bilingual paraprofessional.
Thank you. And this is a second question from the same person. Oh, give me 1 second. This is from Facebook, and she asked, for children entering kindergarten, does the CSE team, oh, I guess she rephrased the question, sorry. Let's move on to the next question. This question is for Carolina. Can you find bilingual education? Oh, I read that one. All right. Next. Can a student go through a dual language bilingual education to transitional bilingual education?
Yes, absolutely. And vice versa. So a student can be in a transitional bilingual education program and then decide, the family might decide that dual language is more aligned with, their values and what they want for their child. And so a student can transition into either program. It's really all about, however, I do want to stress that, as I mentioned during the slide where I showed the map and where we have our classes, it's a program that exists in 109 schools. And so sometimes we may not be able to offer you both bilingual options. Sometimes we might only have a dual language program available. Sometimes we might only have a TBE, a transitional bilingual education program available. So it really depends on seat availability, but we also look at proximity to your home, right? We don't want your child to be on the bus for hours on end to access a bilingual special education program. And like I mentioned during the presentation, your child's learning needs are going to be considered met as long as they are paired with that bilingual teacher in a bilingual program. And so that's why I say that the model, not that it doesn't matter, but a child will be considered supported, well supported in either program because they're receiving that instruction in their home language and in English.
Thank you. Next question. Why is bilingual education not accessible in all public schools?
That is a great question. Similar to our other specialized programs, right? We are developing our teachers through training, and some of these teachers have to have specific certifications. And so it's also about where the need is, right? I don't know if you recall when I mentioned that most English language learners are served in programs where the instruction is done in English, and it is determined that the student will be able to be successful. And families may want English instruction only for their child. And so it really depends on a variety of factors. But I do want to stress that all specialized programs look at where the need is, where we're getting applications from, where we're getting placement inquiries from, and we target specific schools and specific districts to engage superintendents and school principals in opening up programs where they are needed.
Thank you. Next question. For students with IEPs, is there a specific classification required on the IEP in order to be accepted into the programs presented here today?
So for the ACES program, the Academic Career and Essential Skills program, we're looking for that classification of intellectual disability or multiple disabilities. For bilingual special education, any of the disability classifications can apply. Any student, it doesn't matter the disability, can have English language learning needs. And for SEED, the classification wouldn't.
There's no specific classification for SEED. They just have to have intensive sensory needs and an OT occupational therapy mandate.
And for PATH, the disability classification that we're looking for is emotional disability. However, they can also be at risk of having getting this disability classification. So they may not yet have the IEP, or they may be in the process of reevaluating, and the classification may eventually change based on what the needs of the students are.
Thank you, ladies. So this is our last question from our Q&A. Does the SEED program assist students with their ADLs? Daily living.
So the SEED program does not assist with the ADLs. However, children who have sensory integration challenges, often they have difficulty with ADLs. And when we're able to improve their sensory integration functioning, we often see improvement in ADL functioning. So it depends on what the underlying issue is that's affecting their ADLs. And I will say, because SEED occurs after school hours and on weekends, there is always the OTs and PTs on site administrators. If they're coming to a Central 10 SEED side, we have related service supervisors on site. So families do get additional support with any kind of additional concerns they have.
Thank you. We have an additional question that came in through Facebook. And it reads, what is the difference between an ACES program and a District 75 12-to-1?
This is actually a very common question. So given the student's abilities, right, the classification of intellectual disability or multiple disabilities, and also the criteria of participating in New York State alternate assessment, the ACES classroom is very similar, or the student profile for ACES is actually very similar to the profile that you would find in a District 75 setting. However, students within the ACES program do not need or require the level of support that are offered in a typical District 75 setting. I like to have families think of the ACES program as being a special club, right, for students that present with similar needs and similar abilities, right? In a typical District 75 12-to-1 special class, there's going to be a mixture of abilities and disability classifications, right? So you might have students with complex physical needs. Nursing, for example, is a large one in a District 75 setting, whereas in the ACES program, all of the students have intellectual disabilities, right? So these skills are similar. Their abilities and their level of success might be different, but they are learning in a cohort of students that are very similar to them.
You. So I want to open up the floor for our audience who is present here today. If they have any questions, please let me know and I can pass around the mic.
Just a piggyback in the last question. What is the difference of the transition path between District 75 and ACES? In the sense that, what if it's a student who is in District 75 that has intellectual disability or the multiple disability? I wonder what is going to be, but I know the transition in District 75 is a very strong kind of so I wonder what would I recommend to a parent? What is the difference between the transition path for both programs?
So I want you to think about transition as being specific to your student, right? So the idea is for any New York City public school to provide options and opportunities for your child to be as independent as possible in their post-secondary life. But that planning begins at age 12, right? In the child's IEP. So in elementary school, the students are working on career exploration. As you go into middle school, you start thinking about your post-secondary planning, what your outcomes are, partnering with families and agencies to open up pathways to independence. Students that are in District 75 high schools, I know, tend to work in occupational training centers by District 75 design. So ACES programs are not OTC programs. Our students are given opportunities to develop those work skills in-house and by internships. So certain schools have partnerships with community entities where students are going into the community and practicing and learning job skills. They're doing job shadowing and exploration in that way. Many of our high school programs have very strong culinary preparation, if that is a path that your child is interested in, where they are learning different environments. They're in cafes, they have school stores, they're building, practicing delivery systems, maintenance. They are exploring they're practicing skills around money and commerce. So really, when we think about the transition aspect, I want to kind of shed a light onto the post-secondary planning sections of your child's IEP, because the transition piece should be individualized to the needs and the goals of your child and your family.
You also, for ACES, is the recommendation also, because the application is on email, the recommendation comes from, is it similar to Nest in Horizon, like it is assigned the by the office, or is also like a recommendation from the school team?
So when you apply to an ACES program, you're applying centrally. The placements are offered, and we always offer the closest available seat first. Um, we also take into consideration, I would say at high school, we look deeply into vocational assessments and career path that the child is interested in to pair students into programs that are going to offer an industry that they're interested in. So for example, if a child is heavily interested in culinary in Queens, we were going to look for a seat at a Queens program with a very strong culinary program.
Can I quickly ask for the seed program? How does it look the participation of the family in the program? Can they have a connection, for example, if they happen to have OT services out at home? Can the OT of the student come also and participate? How does it look like the family involvement in the program?
Alrighty, so I will move on to the next question that showed up in the Q&A. Can the students in the ACES program have a one-to-one paraprofessional?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of the mandated, so a paraprofessional is a mandated service in your recommended services and programs page. ACES programs are, the IEP is a living document, living legal document. And so the services will be rendered to your child as they present in the IEP. So whether it is a paraprofessional or particular related service, everything that is in your child's IEP follows your child is provided at the school.
Alrighty, so I think, oh, we have another question that came in. How are students identify for participation in the IREAD program, and what criteria are used to evaluate their programs?
So as Rebecca mentioned, there isn't a specific IEP requirement for IREAD. There isn't a specific classification requirement. It is for once your child is identified as having a reading struggle. So not even necessarily to have dyslexia, but once there is a reading struggle, you apply and the team will go in. There is an assessment that is conducted to confirm the grade of disability around reading that I do not know the name of, but you can absolutely reach out to Rebecca and the team at IREAD at IREAD program at schools.nyc.gov.
IREAD isn't just grades from kindergarten to fourth grade, I think. So what happened with the students that are, for example, in seventh grade that are showing some dyslexia? Um, Parents can ask for evaluation. There will be what interventions could be for a child or a student that is in a higher grade than, I think it's fourth grade.
Thank you. So that concludes our questions. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed today's presentation, specialized programs, IREAD, PAV, bilingual special education, ACES, SEED, and accessibility. Special thanks to our presenters for leading this webinar on such a great important topic. We encourage our audience to stay a few more minutes to complete our survey, which you will find in the Q&A. If you have any questions that you would like to share with our presenters directly, please let me know and I will get in contact with them. Thank you for those joining us via Facebook. To assure a copy of the materials from today's webinar, please contact our intake line. This presentation also will be posted on YouTube in a few days. Thank you again for everyone who joined us today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.